Welcome to the second installment of Survive to Thrive. Super excited to, first of all, be part of this in partnership with Trailhead. And I guess by way of introduction, my name's Nick Miller. I'm the Executive Director at the Venture College, which is a program in the College of Innovation and Design at Boise State. We're presenting this series of discussions, Survive to Thrive, in partnership with Trailhead, and we're aiming to help businesses that are impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. A few housekeeping items, an overview of today, and then we'll jump right into it. First of all, as you join, if you wouldn't mind for now, muting yourself as well as turning your video off. But we'll try to limit the video for now to the panelists and the folks that'll be introducing themselves shortly. With this many video participants, things could get a little bit unruly, but once we get towards the end, we'd love to have a discussion. Today's session is going to be about finance, and we have some folks here from the SBA, some folks from banking, and a person from the venture capital world as well with us today. So really excited to have all of them here. They're going to give us an overview of their perspective on where things are today and things that companies should be thinking about, and then we'll jump right into the Q&A. Hopefully you are now seeing the chat feature, which is where we will be collecting questions. If you can put your questions in there, Tim and I will do our best to get to all of them and pose them to our panel. In addition to the chat feature, today we're going to be trying out a different feature using polling. So it's new, and we'll see how it works. So please be patient with us. But when you see that pop up, please do your best to answer the question. Just one note, all of the information is anonymous. So, don't feel like there's going to be any sensitive information gathered here. We're just trying to get a better understanding of the pain points that you're facing as a company. And it'll help us to drive where we take the next discussion and where this discussion goes. So with that, I'll pass it off to T.M. Rostigar, the Executive Director at Trailhead, and he is going to introduce our panelists, and then we'll have them give an overview, and we'll jump right into the discussion.
Thanks, Nick. T.M. Rostigar here, Executive Director at Trailhead. Thank you all for joining today in our second installment of the Survive to Thrive series. I'm going to keep this brief. I'll just introduce our panelists for today and give them right after a brief opportunity to introduce themselves and give a glimpse of their background for today's discussion. So with us today from the Small Business Administration, we have Christian Pennington. He is the Lender Relations Specialist there. Also from the SBA, we have Cynthia Cowell. She is the Public Information Officer. Representing the bank perspective, and I know we're still waiting on Cecilia to dial in. She's the Senior Vice President at Zions Bank SBA Lending. And last but not least, one of my local favorites, Jim Matheson. He's a senior lecturer at Harvard Business School, and he's also with the venture capital firm Flagship Pioneering. And with that, welcome to all of you. And if I could start with Christian. Christian, could you give us just a brief background on yourself and introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Christian Pennington. I am, like I said, from the Small Business Administration. I am the Lender Relations Specialist here in Boise District Office. Our office is off of Park Center, but like everyone else, I'm teleworking from home. Essentially, I've asked Cynthia from the Office of Disaster Assistance to call in as well, because they deal with disasters on a day-to-day basis, and I deal mostly with more traditional financing. So I'm here to help with that as well. But my background, if you hear slight twang in my voice, is because I'm originally from South Louisiana. Don't hold that against me. Go Tigers. But with that, I'll turn it over to Cynthia.
Good afternoon. My name is Cynthia Cowell. I'm the Public Information Officer for the U.S. Small Business Administration Office of Disaster Assistance. I'm based out of Citrus Heights, California, and I'm very happy to be included on this call. Thank you.
With that, if I could turn it over to Cecilia, I believe you've joined.
Yes, I think. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I didn't know if I had to dial the phone in or if it would work with the computer. I'm Cece Mitchell. I work for Zions Bancorp, and my role there is to oversee the entire SBA function for Zions Bancorp. So I've worked with Christian. I don't recall meeting Cynthia, but Christian and I worked and we email a lot. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. With that, Jim, brief intro on yourself.
Hey, everybody, and thank you again, Nick and TM, for pulling us all together. Jim Matheson here in Boise. As TM said, I'm on the faculty at Harvard Business School where I teach entrepreneurial finance, which is essentially the life cycle of the startup enterprise. And for the last 20 plus years, I've been involved in starting and running and investing in dozens of different companies, primarily out of Boston, but across the country as well. I had the good opportunity to be involved in the Survive to Thrive 1, which we did on Tuesday, which I would recommend to you, not necessarily because I was involved in it, but because we had Mark Solon and Melanie Rabaki share some excellent advice that we'll reference a bit later about things you can be doing right now to ensure that you can survive through this period, that you can thrive in the future. So I'll talk a little bit later about sources of equity capital, how equity investors think, and some things to consider as you're thinking about adding equity to your capital stack.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to complement and supplement a lot of the information that we'll go over today. Cynthia, if I may start with you and ask you to give us and our viewers a high-level overview of what's out there currently from the SBA. I know there's been evolving news around the 8 packages that are currently going through Congress or have gone through Congress. I myself, I lead a nonprofit, so I'm looking at the disaster relief loan option right now. Why don't you give us just a brief overview of the status quo of what's out there currently available to small businesses?
Happy to do that. The Small Business Administration's low-interest economic injury disaster loans are now available to small businesses, small agricultural cooperatives, small aquacultural businesses, and private nonprofit organizations affected by the loss of revenue due to the coronavirus. They're available, like I said, to small businesses. Examples of eligible businesses are businesses directly affected by the disaster, businesses that offer services directly related to the businesses targeted in the declaration, and other businesses indirectly related to the industry that are likely to be harmed by losses in their community. To help meet working capital needs caused by a declared disaster, in this case, the COVID-19 declaration, we help pay financial obligations, operating expenses, which could have been paid had the disaster not occurred, and this includes fixed debt payments, payroll, accounts payable, etc., and also for extraordinary expenses caused by the disaster. EIDLs do not replace lost revenues, lost profits, or fund expansion. These loans amounts can be up to $2 million, and the term can be up to 30 years. And it's based on each applicant's financial condition. EIDL assistance is only available to small businesses where SBA determines they are unable to obtain credit elsewhere. Now, that doesn't mean that a business has to go through a bank and find out they're not eligible for a bank loan. This is for businesses who are small, who otherwise would not get favorable interest rates had they applied at a bank. And people or business owners can apply online for these loans. They need to have a credit history acceptable to SBA, and they must show that they have the ability to repay the loans. We don't just look at everything to date because we understand that a business may not have been able to pay their bills because of this, and this has been going on since January 31st. And so their credit history may have a few dings because of this, and they may have some late payments out there. So we do understand that. Economic injury disaster loans over $25,000 do require collateral. However, we are not taking real property as collateral for these loans. we do require other assets, and we take a security interest in furniture, fixtures, and things of that nature. A business would need to file a completed application. It would be an SBA Form 5, which is a business application. Private nonprofit, or excuse me, sole proprietors can use the SBA Form 5C, which is a little less involved than a business application. We're going to need a tax information authorization, and that's the IRS Form 4506T, which is available on the website. We're going to need it for the applicant and all principals and affiliates to the organization. We like to get the 4506T up front, but if you need to have it signed by someone who's not right there, that's not going to stop us from starting to process your application. We're going to need complete copies of the most recent federal income tax returns for the applicant business and an explanation as to why they wouldn't be available. These don't need to be turned in immediately, but they will need to be turned in, so that's something you might want to find. We're going to need a personal financial statement and a schedule of liabilities for this. We're going to need a current year-to-date profit and loss statement, and we're also going to need oh, sorry, my mind just drew a blank. We may need an SBA Form 1368, and what that does is it provides monthly sales figures for the last couple of years. And that's mostly when you're asking for an increase in the amount of economic injury. That also helps us to see if there are trends. I know in Idaho you have a lot of summer businesses and a lot of winter businesses, and so this will help us to determine when your busy time is. The applicant must have a physical presence in the declared disaster area, and applicant's economic presence alone does not meet this requirement. They need to be, the physical presence must be tangible and significant, more than just having a P.O. box in the disaster area. This would not qualify as a physical presence. That's mostly for foreign-owned or a business that is owned by someone outside the declared disaster area. The primary industry of the applicant and its affiliated group must be an otherwise eligible activity for the applicant to be eligible, regardless of the nature of the loss. Primary activity is based on revenues the year preceding the disaster. And the size of the applicant alone without affiliates must not exceed the NACIS or NAICS standard for the industry. And the applicant combined with its affiliates may not exceed the size standard for either the primary activity of the applicant alone or the primary industry. Now, all that is a bit confusing when you just look at it at the face. We recommend that all businesses go ahead and apply, and then that can be worked out in processing. The businesses need to be, hello?
My apologies. If I may interject, I'm getting some very relevant questions with respect to what you're covering there. So I myself, I've gone through the process of the application. So I'm pretty familiar as you're naming the required items, the checklist, if you will. I'm very familiar with those things. What about for those viewers that initially are going to feel overwhelmed with the checklist itself, and then those who may need assistance in completing those, or at least having someone to look it over before they finally submit it? Do you have any advice on those points?
Yes, we do have our customer service center, which is open 8 to 5, 7 days, or 8 to 8 Eastern time, 7 days a week. And I know that there are glitches in the system. We had hundreds of thousands of businesses calling in and trying to apply online. And so we beg for people's patience. But these people are specially trained to help a business work through their application process. The SBDC and the district offices may be able to help as well.
Okay. And one thing you've also mentioned, and I'm probably too familiar with that detail as of the last 48 hours. You said, businesses who have lost revenue due to COVID-19 in terms, and then you also covered the use of funds of this loan. Things like payroll, fixed debts. I'm assuming rent is part of it too. I have been reading about potential loan forgiveness if indeed these funds are used to make payroll. Can you validate that or speak to that?
I can speak to it, but I can't answer that. We don't have any direction on pending legislation. Once we have something, I will distribute that out to the district offices, but we have nothing right now. SBA has not forgiven loans for several years, and that's because by law we're not allowed to. So if that law changes, we'll certainly let people know.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So now I'm going to get into ineligible EIDL applicants. And EIDL is our acronym for Economic Injury Disaster Loans. It's not to say a business is idle. It's just that this is the type of loan it is. Ineligible applicants include religious organizations, charitable organizations, consumer and marketing cooperatives, except for small agricultural co-ops. Gambling concerns, that is a concern that derives more than 1/3 of their annual gross revenue from legal gambling activities. Casinos and racetracks, example would be businesses whose purpose for being is gambling, i.e. casinos, racetracks, and poker parlors, and they are not eligible for EIDL assistance, regardless of the 1/3 criteria I just mentioned. Concerns engaged in illegal activities. I know that there are lots of states where the cannabis industry is legal. It is still considered illegal federally. And we can't provide EIDL loans for lending or investment concerns. We can't lend for speculative activities, pawn shops, real estate developers, multi-level sales distribution, pyramid concerns, loan packagers who derive 30% or more of their annual income from the preparation of applications seeking federal assistance from SBA, and concerns with the principals incarcerated on parole or on probation. The concern remains ineligible if the parolee or probation is lifted solely because it's an impediment to obtaining a loan.
Hi, Cynthia, this is Nick, and we're having some questions pop up in a separate chat window here that I just wanted to throw out as they seem relevant to the discussion now. One, can you talk about the, and you may have already covered this, so I apologize, but the size of the loans that would be available to the companies, as well as the timeline for, and this is obviously a difficult question given how busy everyone is, but timeline for processing and how quickly companies can get their hands on that capital. One of the first questions we posed to them was, posed to the audience was, the amount of, or the number of months that they have in reserve. And the majority of our audience has between 3 to 6 months of reserve capital. So obviously getting their hands on those resources will be critical for them. So again, the question being the loan amounts and the timeline for the companies to receive that capital.
Yes, the loan amount can be up to $2 million, and that's determined in processing. We will assess your need and your ability to repay. As far as the processing time, we say 2 to 3 weeks. Each business is an entity unto itself, and all businesses are unique. So I can't just say blanket, this is what it's going to take. We have some loans that were approved as little as 3 days after the declaration was made. It just all depends on the information that's provided, if the business has returned the information we've requested, and of course the volume of applications is huge. So we're working them as much as possible. That's why we encourage people to apply online at www.sba.gov/disaster, simply because that does shorten the processing period. But I want to look right now while I'm online to see if the website is back up. It's been crashing because there are so many people applying, and no, it's not up right now.
That's a question that's come up in our chat as well, as someone who started the application, almost completed it, logged on, the site was down. Is there any way to recover the portion that was already completed, or do they need to start over?
Well, we recommend that everybody hit save as much as they can. Once you finish the page, hit save. You can hit save as every sentence you make. Once you can get back on the line, if you have your application or account number and your password, it should go back to where you last saved the application. And I'm sorry if it didn't get saved. If you didn't hit save, then you would need to start over.
Okay, thank you. Another question for a single asset entity organized as an LLC with several members. How far down the ownership chain will the SBA require the same information? For example, would it be for any member which owns more than 20%?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so is there a threshold that you'll require that same information, or is that threshold 20%?
It's 20%.
Oh, okay. Well, this person may have had that in mind when they asked the question. Knowing that we're going to jump to the a little more involved question and answer session, maybe we can have Cease talk a little bit about what she has seen from a banking perspective at Zions Bank. And Cease, you're in Salt Lake City, correct?
Now it says I'm muted by host.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute you there, and
Okay.
I think we were ships in the night.
Yes.
Yeah, would you mind telling us a little bit about what you're seeing? And then as we finish up there, we'll give a little bit of time to Jim. And then, again, just a reminder to the audience, please submit your questions on the chat, and we'll get them out to the group as we move towards the Q&A.
Thank you, Nick. Yes, I am in Salt Lake City, but thanks to technology, I talk to people I've talked to people in Washington today, Washington, D.C. and Washington State today. So it's a small world we live in. And since this national emergency declaration, whatever we're calling it now, started, what we're seeing at Zions, and I would have to think that it's the same for most financial institutions, is a huge influx of requests for payment deferrals. And we are delivering those as quickly as we can, both to SBA loan customers and to non-SBA loan customers. That's one thing that our bank is doing right now to ease some of the anxiety for our businesses as we can. Now we know by deferring their payments and extending that out, that's just a small piece of the help that they need. And so we're anxiously awaiting the CARES Act to come into being as a tool we can actually use. There's been so much change back and forth on the bill itself, on the act itself, that we're still sorting through the language to figure out exactly what's in it. But we do know that we can now offer an express bridge loan for those folks that are applying for the EIDL. but it's taking longer than they anticipate. That's a program that's available to us for $25,000. That one will be able to roll out probably tomorrow or the next day. The SBA just got that to us. We're working now on how we're going to deliver on the CARES Act provisions that are going to benefit so many businesses across our nation. That in Zion's world, it'll be businesses from all sizes, from the very small to some of the very large. And the program is designed to help the business pay for employee expenses, rent, that sort of thing for the next foreseeable future, 3 months, 6 months. And there's a calculation that we'll go through. I'll let Christian talk about the details of what they know so far from SBA, but what we know is we need to know from the borrower. So those of you on the line, if you're wanting to talk to Zion's Bank, and I encourage you to do so, or to the SBA, they're going to need to know what your payroll expenses have been for the last 12 months. Generally speaking, there are some differences for seasonal businesses, etc. But in general, be prepared to talk about what your payroll costs are, and that's salaries, taxes, health insurance contributions that you make, etc. There's a list of it will be given, but to speed your application up, having that information up front will help immensely. These loans will be made based on that amount. We get an average for 12 months. Take that 1 month average, multiply it by 2.5 times, and that's your loan amount that you would qualify for. So there's no set amount that you come in to borrow. It's a calculation, again, much like it is on the EIDL loan. We know that we won't have to take collateral on these loans, which is a big help. We know there are some provisions in there for some forgiveness of payments down the road. We don't know all the details on it, but that's a possibility for every borrower under this program. The idea being, keep your employees, keep them happy, give them something to do. I don't know. I mean, all of us are thinking, how do we keep employees paid and doing something if they're not there? But I'm sure you'll think of some task or something that you can have them do. What we are trying to prevent from the banking perspective, and probably from the SBA perspective, and I know from the congressional perspective, is what we don't want individuals, humans, our friends, our neighbors, our relatives, to be insecure about paying for their own necessities for the next few months. So we have ability to refer to the EIDL loan. We have the ability soon to offer an express, a really quick $25,000 loan. We hope to have the CARES Act information from SBA to set our stuff up in the next week to 10 days, maybe sooner. Christian could maybe answer that one. And we also have the full complement of other SBA programs that are out there. This one is separate. This new one that's coming out is totally separate, but we still have the ability to help you when you need to order inventory, when you need to buy equipment, those types of things. So we're here, we're open for business, and we want to help you get through this. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Cece. And we've got some great questions rolling in. I'd like to toss it over to Jim Matheson now to have him give a little bit of a private capital perspective for those of you that may have investors or just be interested in that perspective. So Jim, do you want to just tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in the world and what it looks like for startups in this environment?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Absolutely. So I'm going to speak to equity investment, and that could be from friends and family, could be from angels, could be from venture capital firms. could even be private equity. I don't know how many of you have equity investors, probably some number of you. The thing to caveat about equity investment is that normally is done when there are not cash flows in the business. If you're going to go and talk to the SBA, as you've heard, or Cecilia at Zion, probably going to have to be able to support debt payments and such. But I think many of the things and how I might advise you approach your equity investors, either existing or new investors, hopefully will be helpful in all of your dialogues with your capital providers. Again, I would point you back to the Survive to Thrive session 1, but the best cash that you can get access to is the cash that you already have in your bank account and on your balance sheet. So you really want to figure out how to shepherd that. And there's lots of things that you can look at as far as managing the cash that you have. The next thing you can do is take a look at your business and business model, your supply chain, your customers, and look at ways to minimize outflows and try to accelerate inflows. And that requires a lot of engagement with your stakeholders. It requires building a lot of trust. It requires open, candid communication. Remember that everybody upstream and downstream from you, your supply chain and your vendors and your customers, everybody is going through this. So this is a sudden shock to the whole local, national, and global community. So you're going to have to find ways to engage and understand their situation and find true win-win solutions to manage cash flows for everybody. It may be that a bigger company has cash, but they might like a preferred status or a lower price on your product or service in the future. So you can find creative ways to engage, to at least have the conversation, as Cecilia mentioned, with folks that you owe money to that you might be making either no or slower payments. So manage your cash and try to figure out your cash flows. And if you haven't done that already with your business, really understand literally on a day-by-day basis the cash that should be coming in and the cash that's going out. I've been in situations with companies that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and we get in tough situations and we literally have a daily cash flow. And it reminds me of early in my life before I got into startups, I was a Navy pilot. So I used to fly on and off aircraft carriers. And when we would launch, we would have what we call a fuel ladder. So we would know exactly the minimum amount of fuel that the aircraft needed to fly. And we would track that. And if we were out for an hour or an hour and a half on a mission, you would look at that fuel ladder, you knew exactly the minimum amount of fuel you needed before you started to get into a tough situation. So you should understand your cash flows, but also understand the minimum cash requirements you have to last 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and this may go as long as 18 months. And that's a difficult thing, so you got to really get into that and understand the cash you have and the cash you need. Then if the mission turns to trying to access new equity capital, there's two sources of that. First are your existing investors, could be friends and family, could be angels, could be a venture capital firm, and then there's new equity investors. I would say that the challenge of getting new equity investors into your company at this point is very difficult, but we'll come to that in a moment. So the first thing you need to do, like you're doing with all your stakeholders, is have an open, candid conversation with your current investors. Understand what kind of investor they are, understand their situation. If they're an angel investor, they're investing out of their own personal bank account. So they may be significantly hit by the market downturn and the public markets retracting quite significantly. On the other hand, if you've got capital from a venture capital firm, they probably have a fund that they're investing in. So you need to understand where that fund is in its life cycle, and are they mostly focused on their existing portfolio, or are they actually open for business to do new deals? You have to understand their incentives, what their mindset is as investors, and ultimately you got to really assess the relationship and how much trust you have with those investors. If you're going to go into your existing investors, first of all, have a plan. You've heard that already from the SBA and from the bank. Understand your plan, and that plan cannot be business as usual. It has to be, a significant hard look at your cash flows, at your projected revenues, and also showing what kind of sacrifice that you as the owner and operator and that the team are making. Because you can't continue to fund a full plan and go in and ask your investors to support. You're going to need to show that you're also putting some skin in the game with them. It's not enough to ask them to support you because it's difficult. You're going to have to re-engage them in the vision and the mission of your organization. What is it about? And there's a number of businesses out there that are thriving in this difficult times, whether it's something about, look at Zoom. Zoom's business is going crazy. If you have something that is beneficial in this time when we're all sequestered and disconnected, or you see a vision of the new future after the pandemic subsides, you want to engage them in that new vision, and people can get excited about that. But first and foremost, you just need to be able to communicate. And also realize that even if your existing investors don't have cash to provide you, they can have advice. A lot of these folks like me have been through the downturn cycles in '01 and in '07 through '09, so they can help you and advise you through these difficult situations. And at a minimum, if you're going to go access new capital, you're going to have to, in almost all cases, get approval from your existing investors. So you at least need to communicate with them and get them on board with your new plan, even if they can't provide you fresh capital. Then that turns us to new investors. There certainly are investors out there, whether they're in the public markets or even the private markets, that see this as a very good opportunity to get involved with exciting businesses at a better price. For the last 10 years, we've been on the longest bull run market that we've seen. That has been both in the public markets, but it also has translated down into the private capital markets, where we've had very company and founder friendly terms, high valuations, very recourse light terms. That almost certainly has already changed and will continue to change. So there are investors out there who see this as an opportunity to buy low and hopefully see some improvements over the coming years. So you first need to find out, is the investor open for business? How do you get access to that investor to have the conversation? Are they a good match for you based on the amount of capital, the type of capital, and the type of business that you're involved in? And accessing new capital from new investors is a very long process. So if you see an opportunity to grow and capital would help you, I think that's a good avenue to go down. If you're short of cash in the coming weeks and even the next few months, accessing new equity capital is very, very difficult. The other thing, and the final thing I'll say, is if you do have equity capital already into your company, it could be in a price security, it could be in an unpriced, like a bridge loan or a SAFE, a simple agreement for equity. That agreement may have been priced a year ago or 5 years ago, and the price may be much higher than what your company might be valued at today. So you have to go in very open-minded that the price and the structure of your historical investments might be irrelevant at this point. So you're going to have to be creative working with new investors and also your existing investors who may have to approve a significant restructuring of your company. And as we talked about with your stakeholders, you have to find a win-win relationship. With new investors, it may not be so win-win. It may be they win more than you win, but the victory you get is you get new capital. Hopefully you get a good additional investor and they can grow with you as you go forward. But it's a difficult time, so you should expect that you're probably gonna take a hit on price. So in summary, preserve the cash you have, work with your stakeholders to manage your cash flows and really understand them literally down to the day. Engage your existing capital providers, whether they're the SBA, their debt or equity providers, and really have a conversation with them about how they're doing and your new plan. And then really in rare circumstances, would I advise you to think about accessing new equity capital. And all this stuff can be pretty complex, so we're here to support that, and there'll be a lot of resources on the Trailhead Slack channels, and we'll be putting stuff up and we'll be fielding questions so I can help you think through some of the challenges of refinancing or accessing new capital in these markets. So over to you, Nick.
Great, thank you, Jim. So, you know, I think as the group can tell, we put together a really diverse set of folks today, from the SBA all the way over to equity capital and our partners in banking. So I know we have a few questions that folks have posed. So maybe I'll start to throw those at the panel. You know, any of you feel free to jump in. I know TM also has a series of questions that have been posed by Trailhead members and others, some on the call, some not. First question, do these loans, and I believe that this question is in reference to the SBA disaster assistance, but do these loans cover rents and AP as well, or just the payrolls?
The SBA economic injury disaster loans can be used to cover your rent as well as your payrolls. Any of your regular, ordinary expenses that you would have paid before, this can be used to cover that. This is not for replacing profit or for reinvesting in other things, but your normal day-to-day routine expenses are covered under an EIDL loan.
And Nick, from the standpoint of what will be coming out of the CARES Act, the loan amount is based on your payroll expenses, but the use of proceeds can be used to pay your operating expenses, such as accounts payable, rent, those sorts of things.
Okay, and specific to that, just a little deeper dive, is the owner salary eligible in cases where entities have had to lay off employees?
For the CARES
No,
Act,
that is not covered. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
okay, I was just going to say on the CARES Act, yes, owner's salary is included. If it's a sole proprietor, there's special calculations we can use there. So, sorry, my dog is unhappy. Just keeping it real, team. Lost my train of thought there. The owner's salary is, what is excluded is salaries over 100,000 in a year.
And with the EIDL loan, if the owner is taking a salary prior to, that can be included. If they're paying themselves from the profits, it can't. However, if the president does declare a state of emergency that allows a business or allows for disaster unemployment insurance, then sole proprietors are eligible for that.
Okay. You know, one of the questions a Trailhead member posed to me, and you've answered it, is about, it was twofold. One, the first question was, hey, what kind of loan amount should I ask for? And, you know, is it based off any kind of ratios? Would you mind repeating the calculation? I heard you say average payroll times 2.5.
Yes, so you'll need to have a good handle on what you've paid over the last 12 months for payroll expenses. That would include salaries, 1099 contractors, amounts you paid for healthcare insurance premiums, all of those payroll type associated costs. We add them all up, divide by 12, and that becomes your 12-month, your trailing 12-month, 1 month average. To get the loan size then that you would qualify for, we take that amount times 2.5.
And your calculation is also assuming a 12-month, you basically, are you looking out 12 months from the time of application to cover?
No, it's a look back. It's a look back.
Okay.
No, so that you determine the loan amount looking back. And then once you've gotten your CARES loan, or whatever you're getting, if you find that's not enough, if we find this is going to be a more extended period of time before everybody's functioning well, there's several different options available to you, an additional loan of some type if that's what's needed, pushing payments out if that's what's needed. So there's all sorts of things. Everybody is going to be looking at making sure as many of our wonderful small businesses and medium-sized businesses and large businesses can stay viable and succeed through this trial in time.
So the follow-on question to this, and we've just talked about this in a different way, is how many months in the SBA is the SBA considering as an emergency need? And I'm assuming since you are taking the trailing 12 months, the look back approach, it would align with a 12-month roadmap for the emergency need. Am I wrong in that assumption?
Yeah, because really what we're looking at is a short-term emergency situation, 8 to 12 weeks, depending, because right now we're already, 6 weeks into this, so 8 weeks should get us over that peak that we're talking about where people can start to get back out and do what they normally do. that can all change. We all know that there is nothing constant except change. So based on what we know now, that's the way that it looks like it's going. Christian, if he's still on, may have some more information about that, but I've been on a couple of calls already today, and that's what they're saying to us.
Thank you for clarifying.
We haven't got anything official down the pike about the new stimulus package or any of the new loans. And like Cynthia said earlier, neither herself nor I can talk about pending legislation. We're barred from talking about that. But I assure you, as soon as I know something concrete about all this stuff, I will 100% share it with you. If something's happened while I've been on the phone today, talking to business owners, and then that's not possible. But nothing's come through my email about the new stimulus package. So as soon as I know something, I will share it with you.
And on that note, as we at Survive to Thrive receive resources and content, we will make sure to post that on the Slack channel, and you will receive a link to that in the follow-up email to today's session as well. So we will accumulate the various resources that are being provided, and we'll provide them to our viewers, audience, and members on the Slack channel. So look forward to that.
And along those same lines, what I'm expressing here is what I heard on calls earlier this morning. Nothing has been basically signed, sealed, and delivered. So we're hearing what is in the bill, and that's what I've been talking about. How SBA is able to implement that, we'll be finding out over the next week to 10 days. Is that a fair assessment, Christian?
Yes, I would say that's a fair assessment. Yeah.
Does anybody have any more questions for Office of Disaster Assistance? I'm going to need to jump off for another call here in a minute.
Great, thank you, Cynthia. Actually, one question just came in, and if this is relevant to you, please jump in and answer it. This question says, am I correct to assume that eligible overhead for the SBA EIDL will be determined from the information in the 2019 tax return?
That's part of it. We also take a look at your records to see what you have. That's all discussed in processing. And so you will be asked for more information once your file has been assigned to a loan processor. So it's important that you gather as much information and have it ready as you can. I think that will help speed up the process.
Cynthia, if they have any other questions, I can take them and get them to you. I know you got to hop off the phone for another call at, I think, 2.
Yeah, I have one every hour, so it's been very busy here. So I do appreciate that. And yes, if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them, and they'll get back to me with that information. Thank you so much. And to apply, you can go online, sba.gov/disaster. Please be patient. That site will be up shortly. And you can call our customer service line at 800-659-2955 with any questions you have. You can also email it to disastercustomerservice@sba.gov. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Cynthia. I really appreciate you making time in your busy schedule.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. All right. Well, the chat feature, we've had a few different questions rolling in. Please, again, submit your questions there. We're going to have one more polling question that'll be coming through as well. And just as a reminder, at the end of this discussion, we'll be posting links in the chat to the Trailhead Slack channel where different resources will be posted. The previous discussion will be on the Venture College YouTube channel. This discussion will also be posted to that same channel, so you can go back and review it and capture some of the information. But TM, I know that you had some questions from your members, so I want to make sure we save time for that as well.
Yeah, the majority of the questions for my members were answered. A lot of their questions were with respect to, how they were under the assumption that they had to ask for a specific amount. But my understanding now is that no, you fill out the loan application, you include the supplemental information on your financials, and then during processing, they will determine the amount that you're eligible for. That said, if a business is approved for this loan, the next set of questions was around, do I have to take the loan? And if I do take the loan, does it work like a normal line of credit or loan that I would get at a bank, to where if I decide to stash that money and I never have to access it and I get through this somehow otherwise, and what does that scenario look like? Does the term of the loan, is it activated, or how does that work? Christian, if you could maybe help us on that.
I'll speak to what I know, with the caveat of I will send the question on to Cynthia, because their programs are a little bit different from ours. But I know the economic injury disaster loan, there's no fee to apply to the program. And if you are you get to the point 3 weeks from now and you decide you don't need the loan, you don't have to accept it. So there's nothing, you don't have to take the loan. As far as banking it, I'm not sure. I really think there would be no reason why you couldn't do that. But I'll ask and run that by Cynthia just to make sure. But from what I understand, they're basically just disbursements into your account. But again, I'll run that by Cynthia to make sure.
Okay, thank you. Last question I had is, once the packet is downloaded and completed, what is the best way of getting help and getting a second pair of eyes on the packet before it's submitted? One of my members, his understanding was that the majority of loan applications that are declined for either incomplete information or wrong information that then leads to follow-on requests. Any tips as to how to best streamline from the moment I download the packet until I submit it?
Well, I don't know how many tips I can give you, but he is right. That is the number one reason for declined loans, is stuff's not filled out properly. And it's something. It's a lot of times it's something really, really simple, like the tax form, the 4506T. I've heard of people not filling that out correctly, and that's what they use to get your tax transcripts. And so if that's not filled out correctly, then they have to call the business owner. Business owner have to send them a new file. So I would just pay real close attention. There are instructions on all the forms. I'll just take the extra 5 minutes, read the instructions. I know that sounds silly. We all fill out forms, but the extra 5 minutes now to save you hours on the back end, I think is worth it. And also,
yeah, understand, and I'm in the same boat. And my accounting firm, Jatasa, who does accounting for nonprofits, they're basically my fractional accounting service partner. They have launched an initiative where they created a small team that's going to help nonprofits with reviewing the packet before it's actually submitted. So if you have a CPA, if you have an accountant, and anyone who has any kind of financial literacy within your organization that you can reach out to, I would start there, and then from there go to the SBA resources to get another look at the applications before it's finally submitted.
I think that's good advice, just because you've got to remember, we are being slammed. I mean, I'm getting phone calls from California, Idaho, Montana, Washington, Oregon, Chicago, all over the country, to my own work cell phone. I don't know how they got the number, but they're calling me. So there's a lot of slam. So if you can maybe either reach out to your financial partners, or maybe even the SBDC, ask them to maybe look over it, see if that makes sense before submitting it. I think it's worth the extra time that you do.
I would agree with that. That second set of eyes never hurts any project or anything that you're doing. And the banker can at least help you see if you've got a typo or something in the wrong place. We're more familiar with what to look for on forms that can steer you down the wrong path and keep you maybe that way. For those of you up in Idaho, you can reach out to I think you all know Karen Applegren. She can point you in the right direction. There's numbers of bankers from Zions that if they don't know the answer, they know how to get a hold of somebody who does. So we'll either reach out to the district office or to the headquarters of SBA or whatever it takes to find the answer for you.
And the relationship between the banks and the SBA, please correct me if I'm wrong here. My understanding is that for the economic injury disaster relief, you have to go through the SBA directly. Is that correct? Or can you go through banks and they will? Go ahead.
No, you are correct. It has to
yes, you're, yeah.
SBA. We can help you look at it and see if you've got everything put in the right spot, but that whole disaster loan program is direct interaction with the SBA and not with the bank.
And other programs such as the 7A, the other standard SBA loans, let's call them, they remain active. And for those, our viewers can come to the bank to get that processed and submitted, correct?
Yes, and please do. We're here to help.
Right, Nick, I got through all of the Trailhead member questions I had noted for today's discussion.
Okay. One question that just popped up. Can we get a loan through a lender and an SBA loan?
I'm guessing they're meaning the economic injury disaster loan. Yeah, you can. So the $2 million does not affect, let's say you have 7A financing currently or 504, it wouldn't affect that. And maybe the bank might see it differently. I don't see from our perspective why you couldn't have a 7A and an economic injury disaster loan at the same time.
That's correct, because generally they're going to be for two different purposes. Yep. The Economic Injury Disaster Act or loan and the CARES Act are for specific purposes, whatever the negative impacts have been on your business. And generally speaking, the 7A loan will be doing something going forward to help you ramp up to prevent that happening again. So you can have both. You can have different kinds of 7A loans. In fact, you could have a line of credit or you could have a term loan. So
a follow-on to that, there's a business on here that was originally funded by an SBA 7A loan, is already collateralized under an unsecured loan to the type of business this person has. Will this impede their ability to get the SBA EIDL?
It should not.
No.
Okay.
I can speak to that a little bit further. We have to take collateral whenever it's available. But if there's no collateral available, you won't be denied for the economic injury disaster loan. Which is, and they might also put us in second or third position if there is collateral. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Maybe from here, what we can do is if you have any final comments, we'll open it up to the panel, and then Tim and I will close it out from there. And yeah, so maybe since we haven't heard from you in a little bit, Jim. I know there's a lot of folks with heavy interest in the SBA loans and traditional financing, but any just overall tips for businesses as they move forward in these uncertain times. Jim, just love to hear from you.
Yeah, first of all, thank you to Zions and the SBA for being on. I learned a lot, and I'm getting questions from a lot of different businesses that I'm involved in. A lot of my students are starting or running. So it was very informative for me, so thank you. I think not many of the businesses on, I suspect, are venture-backed, but I think that the mindset that one takes, however you're funded, is the same. I would come back to what I said, is get a plan, be very clear-eyed. I shared the idea of the Stockdale paradox at the beginning of session 1, and the idea being that you have to be brutally honest with yourself and your team about the macro context and also what it means for your business, and really, really dig hard into the reality, but be entirely certain that you're going to somehow get through. And the beauty of this session and the community around Boise and Idaho and including Utah is that there's a lot of folks here to help. So folks have been through this in various forms before. None of us have been through this specific situation. So ask for help, provide help, and stay grounded. Communication is really the key. Communication with your team, communication with your stakeholders, communication with your investors, and really spend a lot of time thinking about what the plan looks like, and really understanding that this is probably going to be several months until we have more certainty. And so the key right now is how do you bridge, how do you focus on that survive piece while maintaining the passion and vision and engaging your stakeholders in your broader vision, which is the thrive piece. This will pass. I don't know how long, but you can look at history and see that there's been many, many difficult situations, even in the last 20 years that I've been doing startups. And just stay focused, communicate, take care of yourself, and this will pass. And there's lots of good folks here on the call and around the community to help you.
Excellent. Thanks, Jim. Cease, would you like to share some closing remarks as well?
Sure. Following on with what Jim said, this too will pass. And yes, it seems horrible right now, and it really is. And this is probably the first time any of us have had to hunker down at home, as everybody is saying it. And that just kind of adds to the stress, because usually you're out and about, and that sense of freedom is a little bit scary for me right now. Do reach out to the folks on the call, the presenters. They all have good advice. I'm directing you to Karen Applegren and her team, because most of you know her. If you currently bank with Zions or not, reach out to your local branch if you need to. You can call them on the phone. You can reach out to your existing lending partner that you have, your relationship manager, your go-to person at the bank. If you need to meet with them in person, that can be arranged. You can call our customer care hotline at 888-307-3411, and they will set up an appointment for you at the branch that's closest to you to meet face-to-face with someone. We're doing our best to keep our employees, our business partners safe. We want you to be safe. And so these precautions seem, they're stiff, they're not normal, they're not what we're used to, but we're getting better at working through this situation. And please know that the survive part of it, the SBA and the banks are here ready to help you through that survival period so that you can move on to the thrive.
Thank you, Cease. Christian, any final thoughts for the group?
Yeah, all I'd like to say is to echo what C just said. We're here to help. If you have any questions, concerns, feel free to reach out to me. I will get you answers as best as I can. Honestly, maybe reaching out by email is probably the best way right now, because while I've been on the phone talking to y'all, I've had 10 phone calls. So right now we're kind of busy, and there's only about 8 folks in our office. But I want to help. If you have any questions, concerns, feel free to reach out. And with that, we'll get through this. I've lived here for 2 years. I kind of follow up with Boise, so I'm kind of hoping. I'm looking forward to being able to get out and go walking around the mountains and go kayaking. So give me something to look forward to.
Thanks, Christian. And I guess a belated apology for putting your cell phone number up on our website, Twitter account, Facebook account. But it sounds like it's been working. People have been calling you, so.
It's definitely been working, and I don't mind it. I just trying to get it to everyone. It can be a lot.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
hey,
Well,
Nick?
yes.
Christian, a question for you as I'm thinking. there's a bunch of folks with probably more capacity right now than you and your team. Is there anything the community can do to help you all process more of these forms or interface with folks coming in? Can you offload some of your workload to some of us to help increase the throughput for the community?
I don't have, there's nothing that I know of that we can volunteer for. I personally have volunteered to help the ODA process loans, and they haven't got back and touched me yet. Because I've done that before. I volunteered for Harvey and a couple other disasters. So I'm thinking maybe come down the pike, but right now I haven't heard of anything, honestly. But I'll let you know as soon as I do.
Thank you.
Great. Good question, Jim. Well, I think that will wrap us up for today, but one just last thought that Tim and I have talked about in between sessions is that as we close this out, we're really hoping that while this is the end of this session, that it's really the start of a conversation between Trailhead, the Venture College, the SBA, Zions Bank Resource Center, the SBDC, all of these great organizations in the community that are here to help you, the business community that is struggling through this. We're a resource to you. At the Venture College, our primary audience has always been students, but given the circumstances, we've been given the charge from our Dean, Gordon Jones, and our President, Marlene Trump, to serve the community. So we're here to do that. I've posted a couple of links within the chat, the Trailhead Slack channel, as well as the Venture College YouTube channel, where you can find resources. And we'll post our personal emails, Tim and I, and would just encourage everyone on here, if you need assistance with your business, or if you're just looking for resources in other places too, we're here to help. So we thank you for joining us. Tim, I don't know if you had any closing thoughts you wanted to add.
No, nothing other than what you've already covered. One last thing, just to the audience and the viewers and the panelists, just stay engaged, join the next one, join other webinars, keep up the communication. As Nick said, reach out to us. We're resources, we're here to help. The whole reason we're doing this is to get through this dip and then come back with a vengeance and rebuild our economy here. And so I can speak on behalf of Trailhead and the staff and the board of directors. We instituted a soft close for 21 days, but we are laser focused on when we come back, we got to take this on with a vengeance and undo a lot of the harm that was done. And then on top of that, work together to add value above and beyond that. So we're confident that we'll get there. And this series is just one of many resources intended to support entrepreneurs, CEOs, and founders locally to get through that. So thank you all for making time for this.
We will be following up with an email to everyone that was registered for this with a link to the video. It looks like we are tentatively holding the next session next Tuesday with a time TBD. And based on some of the polling that we got back, as well as some folks that have been reaching out to us, it looks like the next topic will be employee morale, retention, and just thinking through what it means to manage a team during such uncertain times. We're always looking for new ideas, so we plan to do this for a while. So if you have ideas and there's a topic you need some assistance on, please let us know. The likelihood is that others are wondering those same things. So with that, we'll close out, and thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.